Hiya. Hope you're well. What do we got here? March 14th, Friday, 2025. A couple weeks ago or a month ago or something, I asked you guys if you wanted me to cover video game content. In my mind, I told myself I have to hit at least 75% approval for me to do that. And of course, what was the number I hit? It was 75. It was like the lowest possible number I could have hit in terms of the percentage of people who want me to talk about it. So I'm not convinced that I want to do this a lot. This is going to be my one and only video for video games, at least at this time. I just feel like on YouTube, people who don't create things on YouTube don't necessarily understand this, but people's attention wane. It wanes. I don't know why. It just is. It's social media culture. It's the whole world of social media. It lessens people's attention spans. It just does. People want one subject when it comes to a YouTube channel. They don't want to be doing this and that and that and that. It's too much for most people. They just don't care. They don't want it. In my case, people just want music. And I sprinkle film in there every once in a while, but even that I think tests people's patience. I know there are plenty of you that like that, but there are a lot of people that don't. And I see the numbers. I look at my analytics, I see the demographics, I look at the charts. It's hard to get a grasp of what the actual numbers are in terms of people who like multiple types of content and those that don't. But there is a trend, at least with my channel. When I talk about anything other than music, it fluctuates more. So I'm going to do this one video game video for now, maybe do more based upon this video. But I highly doubt a lot of people are going to watch this. So those of you watching this, thank you for, or those of you who wanted me to do video game content, thank you, because I love video games. I think most men do, boys and men. It's just something that's ingrained in us now. And my generation is the first generation, I think, that grew up with video games, the Gen X, Generation X generation. We're the first ones that grew up with games, and so as adults, a lot of us still play them. And now, obviously, everybody plays games. If you're a kid or younger now, you just grew up with games. But my generation is the first generation that actually grew up with video games. It's just kind of part of our fabric and our culture. And I'm going to talk about just a few of my favorite video games, but current video game culture and where we're at, and maybe a rant or two, things that I do on a normal basis. And I'm having coffee out of my huge, massive 100-gallon mug right now. This is a big fucking mug, but I need my coffee. You understand what I'm saying? Those of you who don't care about video games, I'm sorry. I'm not going to do this a lot. Just hang in there or just turn me off. Don't watch, obviously. This isn't going to be a normal thing. Or maybe it will. I don't know. But right now, I'm going to let it lie and let you guys decide. By the way, every time I do a YouTube video, I look around on YouTube, I kind of get a feel of what other stuff is out there in terms of the topic I'm discussing. And something that I've noticed, this is just, I notice little details. Most of us music lovers are like that. We're detail oriented, right? Like we like the details. It's important. And those of us who love film, it's important. Those of us who love video games, detail is important. So I notice details everywhere. Probably annoyingly so to the average person. But on YouTube, have you noticed like when you click on the YouTube page and all of the thumbnails pop up and you've got all the little videos that are recommended to you? Almost every video you get is a picture of someone with their hands in the air. Human beings love gesticulating, don't they? Hands are everywhere. Like every thumbnail I see, it's people going like this or this. You see their hands. it made me think, like, I'm glad that I don't gesticulate. Those of us who study psychology, or at least when I studied psychology, I learned that people that gesticulate a lot, it typically indicates that they don't have a lot of confidence in their ability or their knowledge or their intellect or their ability to communicate clearly. So next time you see someone like this, it probably means that they, on some level, they don't have any confidence in what they're doing. Maybe it's just shyness. It could be shyness. But understanding psychology at least a little bit, that typically indicates that someone doesn't know what the fuck they're talking about. And there's a lot of that on YouTube, especially with video games. And I know I just gesticulated there, so I'm just illustrating I don't know what I'm talking about. That's my channel. Constant Contradictions. Maybe that's what I should rename it. Occasional feel good to constant contradictions. But yeah, there's a lot of gesticulating on YouTube. People just love throwing their hands around and shrugging their shoulders, um, and that leads me into video game culture. Video games. I don't even know where to start, but I'll move my way up to YouTube, YouTube culture when it comes to video games, because I think it's unique, just like music culture is and movie culture is. My history with video games, I started playing them in the early 80s, when I was a kid. Before gaming consoles were in most people's homes, you got up and you left and you went to the arcade. I know I'm dating myself, but I'm just giving you my history on it. My first experience with video games was walking up the street to a bowling alley. There was a bowling alley up the street, and they had games like Donkey Kong and Pac-Man and Asteroids and Defender and Joust and Centipede, and there's a whole host of video games up there to play. And that was my start. I still remember those times. Like, video games were a big deal. Dragon's Lair was a big deal to me. That was the first, in fact, that was the first game that truly blew my mind, was Dragon's Lair. Anyone watching this that, is in my age group, the Gen X age group, do you remember Dragon's Lair? I mean, that was a huge, huge deal. Looking back on it now, it's just funny, but Dragon's Lair was a big game. Loved that game. I was obsessed with that game, learning the timing and the movements and finally perfecting it. And it was a big deal. Video games were a huge part of my life. The first gaming console that I got when I was a kid that my parents got me was the Odyssey 2. The Odyssey 2. And basically they made games that just copied Nintendo games. Like, they had a game called Casey Munchkin. This Pac-Man wasn't a Nintendo game, but I should say they copied other popular games and made a version of a popular game for the Odyssey itself. For instance, they had a game called Casey Munchkin. That was basically a Pac-Man ripoff. They had a Donkey Kong ripoff called Pickaxe Pete. Those of you with an Odyssey 2 will remember these things. They had golf, they had football, but it was a home console. That was my experience, my first experience with a home console. I don't know that I ever had, I don't think I did actually. I never had an original Atari. For some reason, my parents didn't get us an Atari. They got us a Odyssey 2 with Casey Munchkin and Pickaxe Pete. I think the console that I received after that, I think it was a Super Nintendo. I went from, this is the 80s we're talking about. Early 80s was Odyssey 2, and then mid 80s was like a Super Nintendo, or no, just a Nintendo. Never had an Atari. Most kids had an Atari. I did not. Boy, I wanted one, but my parents were like, "You already got the Odyssey." We were like, "Yeah, but we wanted an Atari." Tough shit. You got what you got. And we were happy with it, but boy, I really wanted an Atari. But we ended up getting a Nintendo, and then it was a Super Nintendo after that, and so on and so on. There was, I don't know. In the early 90s, once I graduated from high school, when at least at that time, and I'm probably going to trail off into something, into a side conversation here, but that's what I do. In the early 90s, when I graduated from high school, I got away from the gaming because I was going to college, I was going to college, I was chasing chicks, I was having a life. And that is something that's just changed. It's a hard thing to describe now in 2025 in this social media culture world that we have. But back then you were forced to interact with the world. You had to leave the house to go do things. You had to go meet people. You had to have relationships. You didn't get to sit on your fat ass all day on social media and YouTube and just do nothing. You weren't encouraged to do nothing. You weren't encouraged to not interact with human beings. That's the one thing I really think is the major tragedy of all social media, including YouTube, is it just promotes people sitting there on their fat asses all day. I know I'm dating myself and I sound like an old man, but younger people just don't have any concept of what this is like. So in the early 90s, I got away from video gaming because I had a life. I left the house. You had to. If you wanted to meet people, if you wanted to connect with other human beings, if you wanted to buy things, if you wanted to do anything, you had to leave the house. And leaving the house meant not playing video games. So throughout the early mid 90s, I didn't really do a lot of gaming. In fact, I thought there was a period there where I would cease gaming. I just would stop doing it. I just didn't have the time. And also I was DJing. I started DJing while I was going to school. I mean, I literally was never home. My life was going to school, going to work, DJing. I mean, I was between all that shit, DJing, working, and school. I was out 80 hours a week. I went home to sleep. And that was a lot of people's lives, the college life, and if you were a clubber like I was, you were out all day, and then you went home to sleep, and then you got up in the morning and you left, and you were outside all day doing shit, and you went home and you went to sleep, and that's all you used your house for, was to climb into your bed and sleep. That was it. So yeah, in that early mid 90s era, I was so obsessed with music and rave culture and dance culture and clubbing and DJing and working and school. I didn't have any time for it. Then, as is often the case in my life at least, I met a girl and my life changed and I started spending a little bit more time at home, and that's when I got a Super Nintendo. I think it was 94. The Super Nintendo had been out for several years, I think, 3 or 4 years at that point, but I think I got mine in 94. And when you get a girlfriend, you tend to domesticate yourself a little bit, even when you're in your early 20s, like I was. Um, I was home more, so it meant that I was playing games more, and the Super Nintendo became a force in my life. Games at that point that I loved were like Super Metroid, Earthworm Jim, Yoshi's Island, which was Super Mario 2. Those were a couple of the big ones, but I played Super Nintendo for the most part. Other gaming systems were coming out, like the 3DO. Do you remember the 3DO? A friend of mine bought the 3DO the day it came out. I want to say that came out in like 93, 94 or something like that. I don't know. I don't remember. That machine was like $500 or $600 in 1993 money or 94 money, whenever it was. Think about that. I mean, you wouldn't pay $500 or $600 for a console today. I mean, you might buy a Steam Deck for that, but you get a lot more with a Steam Deck. A 3DO is just this box of a console with a very limited amount of games. He went and bought it on day one. I'll never forget going to the mall to pick that up. Old Jim. Jim went and picked up that 3DO on the first day it came out. And we went to his place and we played it. And I don't think I've ever seen a bigger facial expression of disappointment on someone's face. We got that 3DO plugged in, we started playing it, and it was like I can still see his face like turning red. The game that we played, it was I don't remember the name of it, but there's a game that Kirk Cameron was in. Do you remember Kirk Cameron? He was in a show called Growing Pains. The 3DO was revolutionary at that time for introducing real-time video in their video games. And so we popped the disc in and we were playing the game, and then it would cut to these scenes of real live action and people acting. And Kirk Cameron was acting. I mean, I know it sounds stupid, but back then it was mind blowing. Like, oh my God, this is the coolest thing I've ever seen. Then we started playing the game, and it was like, oh, this is fucking terrible. I didn't buy it, thankfully, but that was part of why I weaned away from gaming. That experience with the 3DO kind of made me feel like I don't know that I like video games anymore. If this is where it's going, if this is like the epitome of technology and cutting edge graphics and shit, I don't know that I care to keep being a gamer. But needless to say, that was a big progression in the world of video games, I think, in terms of just understanding where the technology was going. Fast forward a couple years, and I was definitely, we're going, yeah, let's fast forward to 96. Yeah, it was 96. I'm still DJing. I'm done with college. I have my first degree done. I got I have two degrees. I have a master's and a bachelor's. I got my master's then. So post master's, I'm working. I'm still DJing. Not really gaming. I don't even think, I think at that point I'm living alone, and I think I have my Super Nintendo hooked up, but I never play it. I go over to my girlfriend's house at the time, and her brother is there, who I befriended just from being, being the boyfriend of his sister. And I go over there to pick her up, and we're doing something, and he's sitting in front of the couch with a PlayStation, an original PS1, which I still have my copy to this day. I hold on to all my old gaming consoles, all my old games. I have tons of shit laying around. He had a PS1 hooked up, and he was playing Resident Evil. My entire world changed. It did. It sounds ridiculous, but Resident Evil, arguably more than any other game, completely changed my view of what games could be, about the level of involvement I wanted to have with a video game. Resident Evil blew my mind. Now I know when you play that original game now, you look at it, and if you're young, you laugh at the graphics. I get it. But in 1996, Resident Evil was fucking insane. It was, no pun intended, but it was a total game changer. It was, I couldn't believe what I was seeing. I remember my girlfriend and I were getting ready to leave. Her name was Angela. We were going somewhere, and I couldn't leave. I was sitting next to her brother's name was Brian, and I'm sitting there with Brian, and I didn't want to leave. I was like, you got to be kidding me with this game. I got to keep watching this. And he let me play it, and I was playing it. And I was in love. Never in my life had I been so taken with a video game. I was just fucking blown away. Went out and bought a PlayStation that day. Bought Resident Evil that day. Uh, it was a huge life turner. And from there on, really, for the past 30 years since, I've been a big gamer. I have bought every console. I'm not really a PC gamer. At that time, when I started seeing Resident Evil, I was more of a PC gamer. I did a lot of PC gaming. I remember at that time, God, this was 96. I want to say I was playing Elder Scrolls Hammerfell. Was Hammerfell out yet? Or was it the one before? I was playing, I think it was an Elder Scrolls game. Was it that early? Maybe not that. I feel like it was an Elder Scrolls game. I don't know. Obviously, I've played every Elder Scrolls game since, but it was mainly PC games. But then when I got Resident Evil, it was like, okay, I'm getting the Xbox. Well, that came out a few years later, but I went and got the PlayStation. I went and got what was it? Was it the 64, Nintendo 64 that was out at that time, right? I'm misremembering that part. But anyway, throughout the late 90s, it was the PlayStation, the PS1. I hammered that thing to death. Now, to give you some context, and so to this day, these are some of my favorite video games of all time. Resident Evil, Final Fantasy VII, Metal Gear Solid, Silent Hill. All these games plus tons of others were all coming out in the late 90s. The Tomb Raider series, Tomb Raider 1, 2, and 3, and then Last Revelation and Chronicles and all that shit. I played all that shit. The first PlayStation was insane. And this is back in a time where video games they had one benchmark to be measured by, that they were just good. Unlike now, I'll get into the current state of video games. I think the current state of video games is the worst it's ever been right now. It's a really sad state of affairs, but I'll work my way up to that. But the first PlayStation between the 5 year period, 96, 97, 98, 99, and 2000 was an amazing time for gaming. I mean, the PlayStation just owned it. So I think it was 2000, right, when the first Xbox came out. I bought the first Xbox, and it was okay. I wasn't blown away with it. It was they had Halo, and they didn't have a lot of exclusive games like PlayStation did. It's still pretty much the case. They have a few now, but Sony's always been way better when it comes to exclusive games. It's Sony. They for the most part they've always done it right. Xbox came out. I got the Xbox. It didn't leave much of an impression on me. Then the PS2 came out in what, 2000, 2001, something like that. I got the PS2. Still have it to this day. Still works. I tested it recently. It still works. I put so many hours into the PS2. I mean, it's crazy to think. I hammered that PS2 from like 2000 all the way up through 2009, because I didn't get a PS3 until a couple of years after it had been released, because I had gone back to school to get a second degree in 2006, and so I put games on the shelf. I just didn't want to be distracted by them. I wanted to focus on my studies. But man, that PS2 hammered it. I mean, I can't believe the thing still works. I just tested it within the past year and it still works. I'm amazed. But oh my God, so many. I can't even name them. I'm not even going to try to name them. Hundreds of games throughout the 2000s. My PS2 was a workhorse. Picked up the PS3 and the Xbox 360 in 2009. That's when I finished up my second degree. I went back to get a bachelor's degree. Graduated with that in 2009. Day one of my graduation, I went to the local Fred Meyer. You guys in the Northwest know what Fred Meyer is. It's Kroger, for those of you. I think Kroger is a national name. There's a local supermarket chain here in the Northwest called Fred Meyer, or it's here in the Portland area. I don't know how far beyond it extends past the Portland, Vancouver area. And then Kroger bought Fred Meyer, I don't know, 15, 20 years ago, but went to the Fred Meyer, spent a lot of money that day. I got the PS3 and the Xbox 360. Both of those had been out for a good 3 or 4 years at that point. Picked them up. I'm trying to remember, what were the games I bought? I remember, I got the Uncharted edition of PS3. Uncharted was the first game I bought, or played, and bought, I guess. Uncharted, great game, great series. Uncharted's amazing. Uncharted, I think I bought Killzone 2, Far Cry 2. What else did I buy? I bought a whole stack of shit. I bought whatever the newest Madden game was. I love Madden. There was a stack of video games I bought. It was a big day. And then there was the Xbox 360. I think I bought the Final Fantasy 12 edition or whatever. It was a white Xbox. Anyway, my girlfriend at that time definitely rolled her eyes at me when I came home that day. I mean, literally, I was carrying video game shit. She's like, really? I'm like, yeah, I'm done with school, man. I warned her about it, but it was like, I don't think she actually thought I'd go through with it. Well, I did. Um, wow, I'm really showing some chest hair today, aren't I? Now, whatever it is. Well, I'm an Italian, all right? I'm Italian. You don't even want to know what's going on under this shirt. It's like a fucking Sasquatch, you know what I'm saying? Real man. I'm a manly man. It's not my choice. I'm a manly man. Anyway, lots of video gaming being done in 2009. And then I've been pretty current with each iteration since I picked up the PS4 within the year it came out, picked up the Xbox One within the year it came out. I'm rocking the PS5 and the Xbox Series X right now. That's a relatively brief overview of my history with video games. My favorite video games of all time, um, boy, I mean, I love video games. So there are all kinds of different types of games I love to play. From Super Mario World to Pac-Man. I mean, if I had to rank my top 20 games of all time, I think Super Mario World would be in there. Pac-Man would be in there. Resident Evil would be in there. Final Fantasy VII, amazing game. By the way, I've been playing the recent remakes. I think they're excellent. I'm pretty surprised actually. They've done a really nice job with it. They've they've stayed true to the original story, but they've expanded upon it, obviously. I've been very pleased with the new versions of Final Fantasy VII. Amazing voice acting, great graphics. I think they're doing a really nice job with it. Metal Gear Solid would be way up there. I've played almost every Metal Gear game since. The Witcher 3. Oh my God. Words fail me when it comes to The Witcher 3. The Fallout games. I think I talked about this in the live stream I did, oh, I don't know, a month or so ago. I think Fallout New Vegas is probably my favorite. I know that's the one non-Bethesda Fallout, but for me, Fallout New Vegas is the best Fallout. I think Fallout New Vegas and the guy who directed that game, his name is Josh Sawyer. I think anything directed by Josh Sawyer and written by Josh Sawyer is a different kind of game. Like I think he truly understands old school D&D tactics and storytelling and dialogue options and just intellectualism in video games. He's one of the best, if not the best. I wish he made more games. I think Josh Sawyer is at the top of the list in the video game industry in terms of people who know how to give a classic and great video game experience. It's Josh Sawyer. Does a great job. He also did a game, his most recent game is called Pentiment, which I would highly recommend. It was a brilliant game. It's like an old school point and click game, but it's got a great story, great dialogue. It is a truly thinking person's game. It's a great experience. I would highly recommend you play this. Um, yeah, I think the Bethesda Fallout's though were great too. I love those. The Todd Howard games, Elder Scrolls Oblivion, fantastic. I think they're getting ready to remaster that, right? Or not getting ready. I mean, the word is they've been working on it, obviously, and they're going to be putting out a remastered version. I really hope they do because I never finished I never finished Oblivion. It came out while I was in school, so I wasn't gaming then, and then I started playing it well after the fact, and then Skyrim came out while I was playing Oblivion. I had to play Skyrim, which, by the way, I know this is going to be a boring answer, but my favorite video game of all time, maybe Skyrim. I know that's a boring answer, but dude, think about it. Is there a better game? It's hard to beat or even match Skyrim. I mean, there are video games, and then there's Skyrim. Skyrim is holy shit, just an amazing game on so many levels. Just a beautiful game. I've actually started playing through it again. I tried to avoid. I put, the original Skyrim I bought for the Xbox 360. I started playing it on day one. It came out on November 11th, 2011. A hard date to forget. 11/11/11. I think I put three or 400 hours into it. I mean, it was ridiculous. So when I put it away, I was like, I'm never touching this game again. It's taken so much of my time. But a couple weeks ago, I started playing it again. I was like, well, it's time. I'm going to return to this game. One of the reasons I've returned to Skyrim, and I mainly for the past few years, I've only played games, and this is going to lead me up to my final point with this video. One of the reasons I have ended up replaying old games, which I almost never do. In fact, I've never really done it up until the last few years, is that the current video game industry is fucked. I mean, the video games coming out now, by and large, are really bad. And in my opinion, there's a very clear reason for it. I'll get into that. But yeah, Skyrim and The Witcher 3, I don't know that video games get any better for me personally. I just love the lore. I love Dungeons and Dragons. I love the characterizations, the storylines, the voice acting. Everything is so perfect. These huge worlds that you can explore, the emotional involvement and engagement you have with the characters. It's just that's how you make a great video game. Cyberpunk too is a fantastic game. One of my favorites of the last decade. People that made Witcher 3, you guys know, they made Cyberpunk too. With the exception of how Cyberpunk launched, which was a nightmare, once they finally fixed all the bugs, Cyberpunk's a great game. It's fantastic. It's not as good as The Witcher 3. And one thing I have a distaste for when it comes to RPGs is giving your character a voice. It's like, don't like Fallout 4. That's where they fucked up in Fallout 4, in my opinion. Fallout 4 is a great game, and I've replayed that, and it's a big game. Fallout 4 is a great game, but don't give your playable character a voice. We're playing it because it's an RPG. We want it to reflect us personally. We don't want voices. This is why Skyrim is so great. It's and Fallout New Vegas. It's we are the character. Don't put a voice on us. I think that's where RPGs kind of fuck up. Is when they give your playable character a voice. Let all the NPC have voices, not me. I have my voice. Fallout 4 is a great game, but Skyrim. I mean, it doesn't get any better, in my opinion. I think Skyrim, yeah, arguably my favorite video game of all time. Just personally, it checks all the boxes. It's such a seamless video game in every possible way. It's so intricately detailed on every level, and it knocks every little aspect of what it does out of the park. Every little thing, all of the races, the way all of the characters interact with each other. I think Skyrim is a very popular game with women, and I know why. It's the men and women in Skyrim are all equal, and they don't harp on it. It's not ham-fisted. They're not trying to force some stupid, dumb, disingenuous agenda down your throat. It's men and women working together, men and women both having equal subsets of power over their people. I can see why it's so popular with both men and women. It reflects real culture, real society. A real society that we all want. Let me put it that way. It's set in a fantasy world, but it does everything so perfectly when it comes to storytelling. There is no battle of the sexes or battle of the sexual preferences, or there's none of that shit. It's just all of these races and all of these creeds and all of these stories are in this fantasy world living like real people live. It's a beautiful game, man. I really hope Bethesda doesn't fuck up the next Elder Scrolls. I mean, it's hard to imagine that they won't after Starfield. I feel they definitely fucked up some stuff in Starfield. I actually enjoyed Starfield. I'm one of the few, but yeah, well, this is going to lead me into the final point, which could be a long one, but games are well, I'm transitioning off of Skyrim. I just wanted to focus on Skyrim a little bit because you guys are going to want to know, I'm sure, what my favorite game is. I would have to say it's Skyrim. You know, it's beautiful. There's nothing wrong with this game. To have a game that is that big in scope and size, and to really not have any weaknesses, it is a true testament to the highest form of artistry. And when I say form of artistry, I just mean artists doing their thing, whether it's music, film, video games, whatever it is. In my opinion, I think Skyrim is one of the best, most otherworldly, and awesome examples of artistry by human beings I have ever seen. Skyrim is a beautiful experience, and I can't imagine many gamers haven't played it. It's a beautiful game. There's nothing wrong with it. I can't think of a single criticism. I really can't. The DLC is all great. Everything, every little thing. For a game to be so massively detailed and awesome on so many levels, it's unprecedented. The Witcher 3 is pretty awesome, but Skyrim's just fucking off the chain. It's amazing. Anyway, Starfield. I didn't want this to turn into a Bethesda thing, but I think most people who are gamers, they've all played Skyrim, and Skyrim is the de facto favorite of many, 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 many people. I think if most people did a top 10 list, regardless of the type of game they usually play, Skyrim would be in the top 10. Starfield was a disappointment. I did like it, but I don't really, people complain about how it was more of the same. I don't see that as a negative. I don't really get it. Like, if you've got a formula that works, expand upon it with different characters, different graphics, different worlds, different storylines. That's cool. I didn't mind that the gameplay was similar. It's a Bethesda game. They've never really deviated from their style of like fetch quests, talk to the NPC, go do the fetch quest, progress the storyline. I mean, Bethesda's always done that. They've always done that. And that's what we expect. What Starfield fucked up because they're getting caught up. This is my final point, and I might go on a few minutes about this. They got caught up in this current woke DEI thing. And I know this is a huge conversation. Plenty of people on YouTube talk about it. In fact, I think this is part of the problem. People on YouTube go to YouTube and search for YouTube content creators who talk about DEI and woke. I mean, there are channels out there who will talk about it nonstop, multiple videos a day, not per week, but per day. They'll just talk about the same fucking thing over and over and over again. I don't know why they do this. It's boring, but you look at the views they have and people watch this. Again, this is social media culture at its apex. It's people want to have their own views confirmed, and they will rewatch the same thing over and over and over. They're not interested in having a dialogue about it. The dialogue is what ends up changing things. But people get into this silo and they just talk about the same thing over and over again, and they just reaffirm their own agendas and their own ideologies. And before you know it, you can't even remember what the counter argument is. You don't even want to hear about it. And nothing ever changes. When it comes to the DEI and woke shit in video games, it's really bad. And this is coming from someone who hasn't really I'm not really overtly bothered with it up until recently. It's starting to get really bad in the last couple years. Like you've started seeing it getting sprinkled into games. Like Starfield's one of those instances where I feel like it's sprinkled in. It's not too bad, but it's there. You can't argue that it's there. They made some choices with that game where it was just distracting. NPCs coming from certain parts of the world that are certain races and creeds that just don't make any sense. I'm not going to go into details about it. You can go play the game and figure it out yourselves. But there were plenty of instances like that where you're like, huh, okay, yeah, that makes no sense. I mean, it's distracting at this point. Someone who doesn't obsess on it, like a lot of gamers do, and they're on YouTube, for someone who doesn't even obsess on it, I'm starting to notice it. And unfortunately, it's starting to be reflected in video games. And this is something, sadly, that happens in all of tech. And I want to remind you, I worked in tech for a long time. This is not something that people are imagining. This happens. I've watched it happen. People in tech companies, especially, the companies do not hire people based on their talent. There is this other checklist. You have to mark every one of these boxes right down to the list, right down to the numbers to get hired. It doesn't matter if you don't know what you're doing. And these companies will absolutely hire people who don't know what they're doing. It's pathetic. I watched it happen. It's one of the reasons I left Discogs. I worked at Discogs, those of you who don't know. This is one of the reasons I left. It was a shit show of, people don't hire the best talent anymore. They hire people based on all of these other peripheral details that don't make any difference into someone's skill and ability. It doesn't matter. It's all these other things now. Is this person underrepresented somewhere? It's again, I don't. It's core value and meaning. I don't have anything against woke. I think woke came from a good place, but like anything, it's been stretched and distorted to the point where you don't recognize what it's even supposed to be anymore. And whenever you come up with a good idea, the wrong people are going to get a hold of it, and they're going to completely fuck it up for the rest of us. And that's what's going on in video game culture. Developers are getting hired to make video games, and they have no idea what they're doing. They have one singular vision. They have one agenda, and that is to crowbar certain ideologies into our lexicon as video gamers. And the vast majority of gamers don't care. They don't want it in their video games. And it's permeating most video games. It's really ugly. Really ugly. Part of the problem too is now it's become a bipartisan thing. It's like I'll just break it down and tell you what it is. Again, this is coming from someone who's not left, right, or even center. I think for myself. The far left they are hiring. Well, the far left and their weird ideologies and agendas, they're the ones developing games now. They have no fucking clue what they're doing. They're not even gamers. So they're producing this dreck, this shit that no one wants to play. These games are flopping, by the way. No one's really playing them. But then part of the problem is like these far righties have made it a political thing, which it kind of is, or not kind of, it is. But these far righties are attacking the developers for hiring these people or the companies for hiring these developers who don't know what they're doing. And they're right. Like I generally I don't agree at all with far right or far left politics. I think they're all equally fucked. But it's turned into a bipartisan thing. The far left are practicing these nefarious hiring agendas, and the far right is attacking the far left for making these shitty games And the far right, they're all over YouTube, by the way. You don't have to look very far to find these people on YouTube who are going off. I mean, every day it's a relentless barrage of, anti-woke, anti-DEI. It's over and over again. It's actually just kind of boring at this point. But then those of us who are more in the middle or more who aren't anywhere, who just want a fucking game we can play, we're the ones that lose out. Because the far left are making their games that no one wants to play. The far right are producing daily content for YouTube watchers, and they're making a living on clicks, producing the same shit over and over again with their anti-woke stuff. But the rest of us who just want a game to play, we're standing around with our thumb in our ass like, can we just play a game now? I just want a game I can play. I think, as usual, I think both sides are wrong in many aspects. The far left being way more wrong in this case. I mean, the idea that you would hire people these are multi-billion dollar corporations too. The idea that you would hire people who don't know what the fuck they're doing because they're a certain sexuality or a certain race, but they have no talent. I mean, that fucking blows my mind. I don't get it. And these companies are starting to fire the staff that they've hired who keep producing these games that no one's playing. So at least there's that. Maybe that's a good thing. I don't know. But then you've got the far right who keep playing these games. They bitch and moan about it on YouTube all day long, day in and day out, but yet they're playing these games. Here's a message to the far right, if any of you ever make it this far in my video. Stop playing these games. That is the ultimate protest you can have. Don't play them. Most video games, if you put 4 or 5 hours into a game, you know whether or not you're going to like it. Why are you putting 70, 80 hours into a game? I understand people want to play a game before they criticize it. Like, I get that. I think the far right gamers, they're having a hard time because they want to be fair. They want to play a game and give it a fair shake before they bash it and totally dismember it. I get it. But you're also you're making it worse at the same time. These video game companies pay attention. They look at hours played and how many people are buying the game. And if you keep buying and playing these games, they're going to keep producing this shit. They're going to keep putting out this dreck that you hate. Again, meanwhile, those of us who aren't left or right, who just want to play a game, we're the ones that suffer. We're not making daily content about it, and we're also not playing the games. We're just like, okay, well, and this is going back to my original Skyrim thought. The reason I'm playing all these older games is because there are no games that are new that I want to play. Like I played, this is the latest game that's been getting the ire of the far right, is Avowed. I subscribe to Game Pass. I hardly think it's worth it, but it's $20 a month. The new Doom is coming out, so I'm going to keep subscribing at least for a couple of months because Doom is getting released for Game Pass. Man, if they fuck up Doom, if they get super woke with Doom, it's the end of gaming as we know it. But I played Avowed for like 5 or 6 hours and it was shit, and I put it away. It was garbage. But people are really just dismembering, wrecking this game, as they should. It's a stupid game. It is not good. Many things about it are just very, 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 very ungood. But after 5 or 6 hours, you kind of know, don't you? The best protest you can have is put 5 or 6 hours into the game and then remove it and uninstall it. Stop playing it. Don't put 80 hours into a game. You don't need to put 80 hours into a game you hate. I mean, these games you hate, if you're putting 80 hours into them, you're just kind of solidifying and promoting them. You're kind of making it worse. Stop playing them. Stop buying them. And this is part of the problem, too. You got to buy a game to play it. Up until 10 years ago, you could go out and buy a gaming magazine and it would come with a disc. They used to do this all the time. They would come with these game discs where they would give you demos. And you could play a demo and figure out if you wanted to play the game. But you can't do that anymore. I mean, they do put out demos, but the games that are where the developers know they might have an issue where people aren't going to play it, they don't give out demos. But that in itself is a warning sign that you shouldn't play it. What was the other game? It was the newest Dragon Age game, Veilguard. I haven't even played it. I do like the original Dragon Age games, but I watched the trailer and that was enough for me. I was like, I'm not playing this shit. It looked horrible, and people didn't play it. It underperformed. So that's an example of where this weird DEI agenda, woke wokeness in gaming is really starting to bite itself in the foot. People just aren't playing these games. But you can further protest people by stopping playing these games. Stop playing them. You're not doing yourself or good games any justice by playing through shitty games. Stop playing Avowed. Stop talking about it. Just let it die. That's going to be the biggest message to the gaming industry. No one's playing our game. No one's talking about our game. Just ignore it. Think about it. If you really don't like someone, what do you do with them? You ignore them. If they're trying to get your attention, they're trying to get your money, and you just ignore them, that is the biggest protest you can have. So stop playing these shitty games, you knuckleheads on the far right. This is the disgusting thing about games, too. It's become like this weird bipartisan thing now. It's just sad. Pathetic. It really is pathetic. And games have never been shittier. They're really bad. Really, I can't think of one. I mean, I can't think of one new game I played last year. I basically essentially played through old remastered games. I played through Fallout 4 again last year. I played through the original three Tomb Raiders because they remastered those. I played through Fallout Vegas again. I think the only new game I played was the Final Fantasy Rebirth, but still, that's essentially kind of a remake. I mean, not really, but it's an old story, but it was a new game. It was a great game, by the way. And that's where most Western gamers are turning at this point. They're turning to Eastern games like Final Fantasy because these are not woke. They're not caught up in all that shit, at least yet. They might be. But our current state of video games is really pathetic. It's pitiful, in my opinion. It's bad. It's really bad. It's getting worse. Um, I see these videos on YouTube too from developers who are like, well, we don't know what people want anymore. We don't know, we just don't know we feel like we're out of touch with gamers. Well, yeah, no shit, we can tell. That in itself is a cry for help. That basically shows me that the gaming industry and gaming developers and gaming companies like BioWare or whatever it is, or Ubisoft, these companies that are fucking up in a big way. That proves to me that they don't know how to hire people anymore. You want to know what gamers want? You start with hiring gamers as your developers. You don't hire a bunch of people because there's certain sexual preference and they have a certain political ideology. That has no bearing in the video game development industry. You want to know what gamers want? Very simple. You go out and hire developers who are gamers. I mean, it's as simple as that. So yeah, when you've got developers basically, going to YouTube saying, "We don't know what you want," well, that's not a good sign. It's not a good sign. Gaming companies just don't hire the right people anymore. I mean, think about it. Up until 5 or 6 years ago, did you ever hear things like this? We don't know what gamers want. Of course you didn't, because they hired the right people to do the job. People who know how to do this job are gamers themselves. They're not a bunch of people who have political agendas and ideologies. And ultimately, that's what's dooming the video game industry right now. People don't want to be told what to think. And that's what's happening. That's why games like, Elden Ring and, what's the game? I can't remember. They're all Eastern games. Korean, Chinese, Japanese. These are the games that people are playing because they don't give a fuck about your Western agendas. They don't care. They're not interested in seeing boss bitches and um, certain races and creeds and sexualities crowbarred into a storyline because they feel like they have to be there because they're teaching you a lesson. Gamers don't give a fuck about that. They don't want to be told what to think. They want to enter a fantasy world and they want to see women with huge tits and beautiful asses. They want to see dudes with their shirts off with six packs. This is what people want in their video games. They don't want to see some fat, flabby, blue-haired Gen Z bitch protesting and whining about how fucked up white men are. Nobody cares. Gamers don't care. And they are generally speaking, and this is for left and right, the far, far, far insane sociopathic left are the ones making the games. But most people on the left, like me, really, I'm an old school liberal. Most of us are sickened by this shit. We're tired of it. Okay? Give us a game we can play with good looking people in it. I'm not interested in seeing your ideology in my game. And hardly anybody is. So, those developers who are confused and bemused about why they can't figure out what gamers want, shut up. You know what they want. Stop pretending you don't know what they want. You know goddamn fucking well what they want. Clean up your development team, hire some people that know what they're doing, and give us what we want. You know exactly what we want. Stop playing this infantile game. I just remember too, my brain's all over the place right now, but I'm thinking of a couple of games that I've really loved over the last 15 years. Those games, Limbo and Inside. Where'd those guys go? The development team that made those. Brilliant games. There's an influx of indie games in the last decade. Most of them are pretty bad. Most of them are pretty woke. Most of them are pretty boring. But not those. Inside is one of the most brilliant games I've ever played. The final scene in that game, my mouth was hanging open. I was shocked. I was almost in tears. It was a beautiful fucking game. If none of you have ever played Inside, wow. I mean, it is proof positive to the transformative nature that a video game can wield. Inside, a beautiful, haunting, gorgeous game. I would recommend it to anybody. I'm thinking of the very end scene. I'm just, oh my God, beautiful, gorgeous stuff. I haven't seen anything like that since it came out. When did that come out? 2016, 2017? I heard somebody on YouTube say this, and I thought it made a lot of sense. They said most video games nowadays are trying to be for everyone, and in turn, they end up being for no one. And that makes a lot of sense. Video games have to fit a certain niche. If you're trying to make a game for everyone and not offend everyone, but also try to crowbar the stupid current agenda into your game, no one's going to play it. And that's exactly what's happening. Get back to the lore of your story. Get back to what makes games great. And maybe we'll get there. I don't know. But the current gaming industry is really fucked up. And, you know, the argument to that, too, I remember like when The Last of Us 2 came out, which is a brilliant game, by the way, it took a hit. It took a hit for being woke or whatever. It's really kind of not. I think Last of Us 2 can be a shining example of where you can take characters and if you're telling the right story and you do it well and you have believable characters and you have great gameplay and you have a big world and you're emotionally invested in it, you can have both and make it work and not have it be a distraction. In Last of Us 2, people were pissed off that Ellie, the main character, is a lesbian. I hasten to remind people that there are lesbians that exist in our world. I have one in my own family. Lesbians are out there. It did not bother me one single bit that the main character was a lesbian. It didn't bother me one bit because the game was brilliant. What do I care? If it's a good story and I don't feel like it's being ham-fisted with its message, there was no agenda I felt in Last of Us 2. It was a story about a woman who was a lesbian who cared about all people. She was a caring, empathetic human being. That's what made the story great. The main antagonist was also a woman, and people complained about what was her name? Abby. Abby was this big buff chick, had these big muscles or whatever. But I don't know. That didn't distract anything from me. I mean, to me, it was a believable character in that world. So games like Last of Us 2 can be, I think, a bridge. You know, it can be like you can have these characters and not have it be a distraction if you make the game in the right way. I think they did. Last of Us 2 is a great game, and I feel sorry for anybody who just reject it because it has a lesbian as an antagonist and has this big buff chick as the antagonist, and it has a lesbian as the protagonist. Sorry, that didn't bother me at all. It's a story and it worked. I had no problem with it. I didn't feel like it was an agenda. And that's where I think the gaming industry can learn. Don't make it the focal point of the story, because then it's just disingenuous and fake. And don't make your game like some fucking Disney game. Like when I was playing Avowed, it was like, what are these characters? You know, like these NPCs were like a bunch of fuzzy little teddy bears. Everything was cute and colorful. What the fuck is this? I mean, adults are playing this game. I'm not interested in having a pink teddy bear talk to me. This is another thing too in new video games where I feel like the villains and the bad guys are always white people. Like white men in particular can never do any good in a video game. They're always the villain. Meanwhile, women can never do any wrong. Gay people can never do anything wrong. Trans people can never do anything. It's always white men. Again, I've talked about this in previous videos, but you don't fight racism and sexism by being racist and sexist. You don't fight misogyny by promoting misandry. You don't fight fire with fire. This is where the far, far left is just so fucking stupid and militant. And this is why people are pissed. It's like these people who say they're on the left, I don't even argue. I would argue they're even on the left. They just have their own personal stupid agendas, just like people on the far right do. It's the neo-left versus the neo-right. None of them are sensical. They're all just fighting for their own personal empowerment. They're not thinking about the whole big picture. They don't give a shit. And this is the battle going on in video games right now that's really depressing to me. So I end up just going back and playing Skyrim again, playing Fallout Vegas. I mean, that is my opinion on the current state of video games. Here I am an hour later. But you guys wanted to know, and there it is. I think our current state is the worst it's ever been. It's rife with stupid politics from two sides who are equally clueless in different ways. And it's just boring and sad. All I can do is keep my protest is to not play these games. Like I put 4 or 5 hours into Avowed because it was on Game Pass. I didn't technically buy the game, even though I paid for Game Pass. I put 4 or 5 hours into it and I uninstalled it. I couldn't play it. It was a clear example of why these far neo-lefties are fucking up the game culture. It's a very clear example of poor hiring practices, developers who are blaming gamers for not playing their shitty games. I've seen the developers say things like, well, these games aren't for you. Well, who are they for? I don't know anybody who's playing this shit. And ultimately it's these far lefties who are making people hate this whole movement. I have gay friends. I even know trans people. And you know what? They don't like this shit either. They don't want to play games that are filled with gay people. They don't want to play games that are filled with trans people because it's fake. It's bullshit. It's disingenuous. This is what whiteys are having a hard time with right now. These far left whiteys is that they hate being white. They have a ton of white guilt, and they think that by curing the headache, they're going to cut off the head. And that's just not the way the world works. Again, you don't fight racism by being racist. You don't fight being a misogynist by being a misandrist. That's not how you do it. It's about equality. You want a good example? Again, go play Skyrim. You make all characters equal seamlessly. You don't bash us over the head with it. When you do that, you're going to have people who hate you. And it's the far lefties that are making this bad for gay people and trans people. Especially the far right, they have this stereotypical vision of gay people and trans people all marching around dressed in whips and chains and leather and straps, and they're draping themselves with rainbow flags. When the reality is that gay people and trans people, you wouldn't even know that they are. The vast majority of gay people and trans people are just like the rest of us. They wear drab clothing and they're just trying to get by. They're not trying to attract attention. And they don't want this shit in their games either. The vast majority of them, they all think the far left have gone out the deep end too. That's the reality. So, man, I hope it changes because modern gaming is a real fucking pisser. It really is. And I have to wonder if it's affecting the production of Elder Scrolls 6 because it's been, what is it? It's been over 13 years now since Skyrim. Now I know Bethesda put out Fallout 4 and Starfield in those years since, but it's been a long time since Skyrim. Much longer than the previous Skyrims took to be released. I mean, they were on a schedule of 2 or 3 or 4 years between every game, but it's been over 13. So I have to wonder if this current woke society is having an effect on how they're viewing Skyrim or Elder Scrolls, you know what I mean? They cannot afford to fuck this up. I think something that happened with Dragon Age, again, I haven't played Veilguard, but when they put out Veilguard, the developers were saying things to the people who were criticizing the game. They were saying things like, well, this game wasn't for you. It's the worst fucking thing you can say. These gamers invested in your world. They invested in your lore. They are the reason that you get to make a Dragon Age game. And when you make some unplayable shit, and then you come at them and blame them for being like anti-gay or gay hating or whatever the fuck it is, and you say, well, this game wasn't for you, I cringe. I really cringe. You should be making games for that crowd, and only that crowd. What are you talking about? This game isn't for you. Are you out of your fucking minds? That's the only thing, the only reason, the only crowd you should be making the game for. Game isn't for you. Man. Bad. Really, really bad. Epically bad. You cannot say shit like that. And you cannot do stuff like that. You cannot make games like that. They're working on the next Mass Effect game, and boy, they have a lot riding on it. It's ironically enough, the first Mass Effect trilogy, the first game especially, is the first time in a game in a big way that kind of not promoted, but just showed same-sex relationships and did it in a very fluid, natural way. It worked. The original Mass Effect trilogy is brilliant. They let the player make the choice. They don't force it down your throat. They're not ham-fisted about it. They let the player make the choice. They don't make a big deal about it. If you're a dude, do you want to get with another dude? There you go. Are you a woman? Do you want to get with another woman? There it is. Go for it. If you're a woman and you want to be with a man, you can do that too. But they don't force it upon you. And they give you options to shut out anybody, regardless of sexual preference or sex or whatever it is. You give the player the choice to accept or decline anything. You don't just give them choices to accept one thing. Again, I haven't played Veilguard, but from what I understand, and I don't have any first-hand experience with this, so I don't know for sure. But apparently in that game, the trans character, you don't have any dialogue choices where you can disagree with that character. You have to agree with every dumb fucking thing this trans person says because you're not allowed to disagree with them. That's fucked up, in my opinion. I mean, you're basically, the whole reason people play RPGs is to give you choice. And now you're taking that away? And then on top of it, you say this game isn't for you? Sounds like fascism to me. BioWare better get their shit right. Because if Mass Effect doesn't go well, they're done. And I'm sure a lot of people want BioWare to be done. Anyway, that is my opinion on gaming. I think I've been pretty clear about it. I'm a lifelong gamer. I really hope that shit gets righted here because I'm bored with the way games are. They're just so bad. I feel like most video games are trying to appeal to kids now. It's weird. It's like like when I was playing Avowed, I felt like it's weird. Like the game is violent, like you're fighting, and it's like it's adult subject matter in some ways, but then it's like Disney subject matter in other ways. Like you have these little furry teddy bears following you around as you kill people, and then the story is very linear. It's kind of a boring story. It's not very deep. Um, yeah, it's this weird combination of like, yeah, we're gonna expose you to as much violence as we can, but then we're gonna give you all these characters like Mickey Mouse and Donald Duck and these furry little teddy bear characters because we don't want to be too racy when it comes to characterization. We want to give you cute, fuzzy little objects to look at. Meanwhile, we're gonna give you women that are mainly just like these weird, big, fat, hairy, ugly human beings. I mean, there weren't any attractive that I saw. There weren't many attractive characters in these games. This is another thing where I think the far left is really getting things lost. Is they think that like these developers want to be represented, so they make characters that look like themselves. And meanwhile, they're a bunch of fat, sweaty, sloppy, purple hair streaked, dickheads making characters that look like them. If I was developing a video game, the last thing I'd want to do is represent myself. I'm trying to present other characters here and tell a story that is beyond myself. So, another thing that really drives me nuts about video games. Anyway, lifelong gamer, I will always love games. I will always find a game worth playing. Right now, I'm not too thrilled with what's going on, but I have faith that it'll get better. But stop playing games that suck. Stop doing that because you're making it worse. If these companies pull their numbers and they look at all of their analytics and they see that you're putting 80 hours into a game, they're going to assume that you like it. Stop doing that. Put a couple of hours into it. What are you playing a game for 80 hours for so you can do a thorough review? Fuck that. Put 5 or 6 hours into it. You know if you're going to like it by then. If you don't like it, cut it. Because I don't know what we're going to do about this current state of video games, man. It's not good. It's ugly. It's ugly. And the game industry knows it. And apparently they're lost. Oh, we don't know what to do. I mean, we just hired a whole crew of people who have no clue what they're doing. But we still don't know what's going on. Why don't gamers like us? Really? Are you that thick? Like Daniel Plainview said in There Will Be Blood, don't be thick in front of me. Come on, gaming industry, get it right. Figure it out. All right, that's my gaming spiel. I'm going to get out of here. It's been over an hour. You guys are tired of looking at my face and hearing about my opinions about this. But there's my gaming take. I'm going to see how this video does. I'm sure only 4 people will watch it, and I'll never do another video game video again. But I have plenty to say about it. So, if there is some interest, maybe I will carry it on into the future. But for now, this will probably be the only video game video I do for a while. At any rate, I appreciate those of you who stuck through the end of this. I appreciate that. Thanks for watching. I have a series of music videos I have planned that are going to be coming up, and I'll get back on track to the music. I will. But I want to talk about video games today. Hope you enjoyed it. Goodbye.